The demand curve is a relationship between price of a good and the quantity demanded of a good, keeping everything else that affects the demand for this good constant or fixed. So if the good is apples, this is units of apples. This is price of apples, price per unit of apples. And so it's measured in dollars. The law of demand is what I have represented already on this graph. It says quantity demanded of a good falls as the price of the good increases, all else equal. So if price goes up from this point to this point, the demand curve, the way I have drawn it, shows that quantity demanded falls from Q1 to Q2. So an increase in this direction leads to a decrease in this direction. And that's what the law of demand states. Apart from price of a good, there are lots of other factors, what we call non-price factors that affect demand for a good. One example is our preferences. We can change our taste for something over time, depending on, maybe somebody influenced us, ads, social media, could be weather. So if, for example, we like ice cream in the summer more than we like in the cold weather. Another really important reason that our demand could change over time is income. And here I want to highlight that when we say income, we mean purchasing power of our income. So this is after adjusting for general increases in price. So normal goods are goods for which our quantity demanded increases if our income increases. So an example would be meals at fancy restaurants. We tend to go more and have these experience more if our income goes up. Inferior goods are goods for which if income goes up, quantity demanded falls. And an example could be McDonald's, meals at McDonald's. A third factor that affects demand is price of related goods. So we can think of goods that are substitutes to each other. So quantity demanded increases if price of the other good, the related good, increases. If that's the case, we would call those goods substitutes. So an example would be streaming services that are competing with each other, for example, Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. If Netflix increased its price, people would tend to demand more subscriptions for Amazon Prime. Goods could also be complements. Complements are goods that are consumed together. So quantity demanded increases if the price of the related good decreases. So for example, cars and car insurance have to be consumed together or bought together. So if insurance becomes cheaper, demand for cars might go up. Another reason why our demand might change is expectations. So we may have that experience now because we went through a summer of stocking up. So if we expect that something will become more scarce in the future, we are likely to stock up. Or if we expect that the price in the future will go up, then we will rush and buy it now, increasing the demand for that good right away. We could also sometimes delay purchasing something because we expect prices to fall in the future. So for example, sometimes we wait for things to go on a sale. What we are doing here is we are saying, I expect that prices will fall. So our expectation of future prices will affect the quantity demanded at present. The last factor is something that affects total demand for a good or market demand for a good, and that is how many consumers do you have in the market. A good example of this is university towns. So university towns are towns or places where the dominant presence is that of a college or a university, and usually what will happen is businesses will close during the summer where students are not on campus, and open up again when students come back for the fall and winter. So that's how number of consumers will have an effect on demand as well. There's one important difference in how we analyze a change in price and a change in non-price determinants of demand using the demand curve. When there's a change in price, we say that there's been a movement along the demand curve. So if price goes up from P1 to P2, what we say is, since Q goes from Q1 to Q2, we have moved along the same demand curve. So there's no change in the demand curve itself. We have just moved from one point to the other. However, if there's been a change in the non-price determinant, in one of the non-price determinants of demand, then we will analyze it by shifting the demand curve completely. So we'll have a new demand curve. So in this case, I drew a right shift in the demand curve, which is to say that quantity demanded increased at every price. Okay, so when demand moved from D1 to D2, quantity demanded increased at every price. Now, an example of that could be, suppose this good is apples. Your preference for apples increased because you're told that apples are good for your health. So what you do is, even if price doesn't change and is equal to P1, earlier you were consuming Q1, now you'll consume more, Q3. If price went up, under the old demand curve, you would have consumed Q2, but now you're going to consume slightly more than that, which is, let's say, Q4. So a change in non-price determinant of demand should shift the demand curve. So anything that causes quantity demanded to fall, for example, okay, so you can go through the list here. Anything here that's not price, that affects quantity demanded negatively, is going to shift the demand curve to the left. Okay, so you can draw a shift to the left on your own. This distinction is going to be very useful when you analyze a real world situation using the demand curve. What you should do is you should try this question after watching this video on your own, okay, and see if you understood what we went over in terms of demand analysis.